not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur, and that's okay. You have to have a special mindset. I was on the phone at 10 o'clock last night or on the weekend doing an activity. Well, guess what? Your activity just ended.
Welcome to Clearing the Path with Will, the podcast where we dive into real stories behind entrepreneurs, where we started, the challenges we faced, and the lessons we've learned. Taking a deeper look into the journey, talking with other entrepreneurs who are out here making it happen. Having everything set in place was my biggest stepping stone.
Meeting one person can lead to many other things, Really, don't be afraid to walk up and shake one person's hand.
Welcome back to Clearing the Path with Will and Gralin. I've got a really special guest on today that's been in my corner since day one, and she is really involved in the East Wake's developments and all throughout Wake, Johnston, and Nash County. Watching my mom, which is who the guest is, growing up, being so involved in business and strategizing to, get to the next level really helped me decide that I wanted to be in business for myself. You want to introduce yourself, Mom?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Renee Baker. I'm Will's mother. And like he said, I've been in the real estate industry for, I'm not going to tell my age, but I've been in the business for a number of years. And I just appreciate the opportunity to come on this morning or this afternoon and have a conversation with Will and Gralin.
You want to start off by, telling us your backstory of, like, you weren't even planning to be in real estate, were you?
No, and I'm gonna try to condense this to because we could be here all day.
Yeah.
I mean, this could turn into a therapy session, but no, I actually was not planning on following the path of real estate. I will start off with I have an older brother, and I always thought that he would be the one that would follow in our father's footsteps. My father was the the owner of the company and started it in 1969, but my brother had a different path. He decided to go into the ministry, and I was went college, decided to go off to Wilmington, and was living my best life, hanging out at the beach, being young, and
In
my
college.
and in college, I had a great college experience, and then anytime my father called, I knew, it was not for chit chat. He wasn't chit chatty about. He'd say, "Well, I need to come down and see you." I said, "Oh boy," so he came down, and it was in the early '90s, and during that time was. One of the several recessions that I've been through in my career, but on top of the recession, he was also diagnosed with cancer. And he was, at that point in his career, he was heavily involved in development. He was building 200 plus homes a year. He had multiple offices all over the state. He was involved in a circuit board business. He was involved in a land clearing business. But he asked me if I would consider coming home and coming to work with him because of his illness and because of the state of the economy and how it was impacting our family. So in 2 weeks, there was no evidence that I was ever in Wilmington. I dropped out of college. I came back home. I did ask him, I said, would you be willing to let me finish? I really want to finish because I had kind of gone to college and then I'd take a break and then I'd go back and whatnot. But I really wanted to finish. So he said, absolutely. So I moved in to, I mean, it was a dump. I was living in Wilson in a little apartment and very little furniture. And I went to Barton and I graduated from Barton. I actually went to the dean and asked for a hardship waiver.
What's a hardship waiver?
He allowed me to take more hours so that I could finish sooner, so that I could get back to a full time status at the office. So I was burning the roads between Wilson and Zebulon daily, trying to finish my college work, and also helping my father with the business. He was going through all of his health challenges, and it was a hard time for us, but I did. I graduated, I moved back to Zebulon, and the rest is history.
So, Miss Renee, I want to ask you, I know you've had a big impact on me coming up as well, starting my company and other things like that. So, with you being in real estate, I wanted to ask, what was your first deal or your first property that you had? How was that like, from managing, if it was a property or if you were selling, how did the first deal go?
It was scary. It was, well, first, if you're from East Wake County and you're William Parrish's daughter, that's scary in itself because he was a dynamic individual. It seemed like everything he touched, he
Go.
it just he wasn't a part of the room. He was the room. So I was terrified. It was a piece of property, and it was a small tract of land, and it was in Wendell. And I had asked for some advice from him, and I was scared to death, and I was scared. He always would tell me. He said, "When you go out to a piece of property," he said, "you never ever put your foot on a line and say this is the property line." He said, "This is the approximate line." He said, "Don't ever stake yourself out." He said, "Because there's always room for error." And so I was out there fumbling around trying to show the piece of property. And then the whole contract was a whole nother, I was trying to, not give off the vibe that I was like, never done this before, but I think it was obvious. This was my first deal. I was shaking, but I remember what he told me. He said, and back in those days, that was not electronic. So it was carbon copies. So he said, you take that contract and you whip it out and put it on your hood of your car and you hold it down and take a firm hand with your pen. And he said, if you make a mistake, don't worry. Throw it on the ground and get another one. And and that's what I did. I mean, and I got through that closing, and it was very, very intimidating, but for me it was such a accomplishment to get that contract done, accepted, and to closing. And that was in the first year I was in real estate. I'll never forget, my numbers came in the first year and I was crying. He came in my office. He said, "What are you crying for?" I said, "I'm terrible at this." I said, "I'm not a salesman like you. I'm not, and he just thought that was hilarious. He was dying laughing. He said, he said it'll get better, it'll get easier, you'll grow. He said you just have to get outside of your head and get the confidence and get out there and get it done. He said stop this crying. He said pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get out there and get it. And so he was encouraging, but he would give you some hard truth too when you needed to hear it.
Mhm.
And but that was my first deal, and it was good.
How many deals do you think it took before you got the hang of it? And I'm sure you still learn stuff today.
Every day. That is one thing. If you're ever interested in pursuing a career in real estate, it's probably a profession that every day is different.
Mhm.
I mean, today when I go into the office, I will guarantee, and you guys have been in my office, so you know how chaotic
Oh,
it is.
You could have a reality TV show,
For sure.
especially with all your rental property stuff.
Exactly. It's, I've evolved into property management, and I did so more during the recession as a way to survive, because that's a steady income stream. And so my father despised property management. The only thing he wanted to do was manage what he owned, but he wanted to work on larger deals. But the way I evolved into property management was more out of necessity, because that is, you're getting a percentage of each rental. So my goal was, hey, I got to go out here and beat these bushes, and I got to get more property in here to fill the gaps so that we can make it through the recession.
Since the recession, how many properties do you think you've picked up
Well,
from there till today?
Well, and I went over to when my father was ill, I went over and thanked him numerous times. Right before the recession hit, he sent letters out to all our other owners and let them go.
Oh,
So he wasn't expecting,
Yeah.
the recession of 2008, 2009 really, it to him, he'd been through multiple recessions, but he didn't expect it to be so long and so brutal. He said in his lifetime that he'd never seen anything like it. So he was expecting it to be a blip on the screen. But to answer your question, so at that time, I would say we're probably close to between 850 and 900 properties that we manage on a daily basis. So, and at the time, I'm not sure exactly what was in his portfolio, but I'd say we've easily picked up 700 properties since the recession.
Miss Renee, I wanted to ask you, with all of the rental properties, and you're having to deal with tenants. How do you deal with a good tenant and a bad tenant? People don't pay their rent, stuff like that. What do you have to do as the management company to get that money?
It's all about the vetting process. When right now, I'll just give an example where since we have close to 900 properties, there's something always available. So we're having all these applications come in. So we have a pretty thorough vetting process. There's the credit check, there's the background check, there's the credit verification, there's the rental references. It's pretty tough if you've ever been evicted. It's pretty tough before. It's hard. That's very difficult to overcome. I'm not going to sit here and say that I've never denied someone from being evicted, because everybody has a story. And I tend to run our business more from an individual instead of just a cookie cutter standpoint. So I want to hear your story. You know, if you were going through a bad divorce and or whatever, or a death, or a bad situation, then I'm
You
just
always give people chances.
absolutely. I mean, it's just everyone has a story, and but if I pull your credit report and you've had multiple evictions, then
Yeah.
then you're dealing with a pattern. But not every chance I've given has worked out to my benefit. But I have had a lot of successful stories where people have come into town, and they're new in town, and
Cool. For
they
instance, Carolina Concrete.
I said, well, tell me about yourself. Tell me what your goals are. What do you want to do? Well, how do you see yourself growing here? And we had a great conversation. I said, move in. I said, you move into office here with me. So he moved into the lower level of our office building on Arundel Avenue, and he stayed there for many years. And now he is running one of the most successful concrete companies in the Triangle. Um, and I consider him a good friend.
Hundreds of trucks, and it's crazy what he's built.
He has built he has built an amazing business, and it goes down to your gut. That's going with your gut, taking chances on people. And I grew up with a father that he took chances on people. We we didn't come from a legacy family. We didn't, I'm not a trust fund kid. My father was a self-made man. I mean, he came from literally,
An orphanage.
well, he was an orphan at 13, and but he didn't let that define him. He worked hard. He worked for the he was a tax collector in his early years, so he worked for the North Carolina State Department of Revenue, and he was there for 12 years. And when he went, and he also ran a car wash and a laundromat after he got off work, and that was his first entrepreneurial um, avenue. And they told him, they said, you're going to starve. You're going to starve. He said, I may starve, but I'm not starving here. He said, I've got to go out and make my own way. And so,
Tax people said that.
yeah. Yeah, they said, you'll be back. He said, no, I'm not. I'm not coming back. He said, I've got a plan. And he went and got his real estate license in 1969. And he started out in an old, and I mean old, I saw pictures. I don't really remember being in there, but I saw pictures of it. And it was an old pink and white single wide on Pony Road, and that's where he started. And a lot of people in East Wake County didn't even know what a realtor was back then. It was he was breaking new ground in East Wake County, so he he was a unique individual.
What so you have all these properties. What how do you handle, like, for instance, great your subs? Like, do you have in-house people that fix your plumbing on these properties, and then you have people like Gralin that manage all the landscaping and everything? What are your processes for that?
Um, as we've grown, I have W-2 employees that do more of my day-to-day maintenance, and they do minor repairs because the phone never stops ringing, ever. The phone rings all day with, the heating and air's out, the plumbing's messed up, the handrails loose, numerous things are wrong. So I have people that work full time for me that handle those tasks. But then we have turnovers. So when people move out, I sub that work out because it's got to move faster. So I'll have a couple of different contacts and depending on if there's a lot of damage or a little damage, I've gone into places, unfortunately, that have been almost destroyed. And so you're basically doing, I call them overhauls. So I have overhaul crews and they come in and do overhauls. And Gralin, he is a sub that comes in and he has a list of properties. He knows what I want. He knows what I kind of like and expect, and he'll go in and, depending on the property, he knows if it's a commercial property, he'll come in and he'll trim the bushes and blow the parking lots off and make everything look good for the customers. Versus a residential is that's more of a just a more of a simple yard cut and in and out. The commercial ones are a little bit more labor intensive.
I wanted to ask you, Miss Renee, with you being such, involved in the real estate, somebody young like me and Will, say we wanted to go out and buy property or we wanted to get into an investment venture such as rental properties, car washes, something like that. When would you say a good time to do that would be? And, what are some good pieces of advice you could give us in case we were to do that?
I think it's all about timing. Timing is it's just so critical. Um, you know, if if you're doing well in your career and you're stable, I think that's a perfect time to start. And also you have to look at the external factors. Check the rates. What are the rates on commercial properties? Look at your location. You know, and I think I've told Will this multiple times. There was a time that East Wake County would have been a perfect place for you to start.
Yeah,
I
it
don't
isn't no more.
I don't agree with that anymore. Because as growth has finally made it to East Wake County, of course that triggers increases in land price and then increases in construction and labor. And so, my advice would be look at emerging markets, markets that are on the cusp of emerging. So, I would go further east, I would go further south. So, and really, honestly, a great place to start, and my father did this a lot and kind of taught me this strategy from a residential point and from a commercial standpoint. Um, if you wanted to, let's say, buy a duplex and you were still living at home or whatever, you could live in one side of the duplex and then rent the other side of the duplex. Now, on a commercial piece of property, that's a little bit different, but you could still buy like a small flex space, and then you could occupy part of that, like if you needed an office
Or shop
or shop or whatever, and then you rent out the other.
by the foot.
Yeah, it's commercials always by the foot, so you would rent out those spaces. So a lot of times in what my dad would do is he was known for building 2-story buildings, and the parish the parish offices would be on the top floor, and then he would rent out the bottom floor.
Like
And
window office.
exactly. So those offices were help paying his way or paying his freight to be there,
Right.
and or help paying the taxes and the insurance and whatnot.
How about it's a good time to bring it up. Like that apartment I was gonna buy, and we couldn't make the numbers make sense. We made an offer on it. I made the offer, and then they came back and counter offered higher, and then I wasn't going to be able to get but like, what'd you say, 1,400, 1,500 a month,
And
and my payment would have been higher for my loan.
well, and again, if we were back where interest rates were not 7%, and I can't remember exactly what they were at that time that we were looking, but your interest rate's so important and where you are. So in Zebulon right now, your typical just your standard 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment, you can't get into for under $1,000. So, and that's a nice apartment, but it's probably going to be an older apartment that may have been rehabbed, but I think location, when you're starting out, you got to look at your location. You got to look at what
Where the growth is going.
where the growth is going. Don't try to jump in a market that is already like in kind of booming right now. If you were starting this process 5 or 6 years ago, then it might be a different story. You could have picked up some property, but for new investors is look at your properties that go into foreclosure. We're a HUD approved real estate company. Not all are. So you could get access or contact a realtor. I always advise to go to a realtor. A realtor is going to look out for your best interest. So your realtor could set up a search for you, that since we have access to everything that's coming out in the market that has been foreclosed, then after that it goes through a certain amount of days where it has to go the first time buyer or the end user would be a homeowner first. But if it's not bought during that time, then it's able to be released to investors. That's a great avenue to start down. I did it. I bought probably, I don't know, probably 10 or 12 properties that were bought through foreclosures. I actually bought one that I went to the courthouse and bid it on the courthouse steps. That was an interesting experience, but there there's a niche there that you can get into and really watch the market for those to come on.
That's another great part of where we can say starting out small can lead into something bigger. I feel like we talk about that on a lot of our other episodes of you have to start somewhere, where you said on your first real estate deal, you were sitting there shaking. On our first deal, I mean, we were the same way. And it's always you've got to start at the beginning somewhere and just look at where you're at now. And we would have never gotten to where we're at now without doing these smaller jobs. And if it wasn't for you allowing us the opportunity to do these smaller jobs, we would have never been where we're at today. So we'd like to thank you a big, especially for every opportunity that you've allowed us along the way.
I can't say enough of how pleased. I mean, I've watched you guys through high school, starting your careers. What a pleasure it has been for me to watch you grow, to watch you mature. And for Will, people may think, oh, well, your mother is
Feeding you money hand over fist.
well,
It makes me mad.
well, okay. Well, we're not gonna get on the mad. We're not gonna get on the mad train. But I do want to clear the air on that. Will Will was was fortunate to have some resources. However, I cracked some doors. Will made it happen. Will Will's the one who had the meetings. He made the contacts. I've watched Gralin, same thing. You know, he's had parents that have been able to help him get started. There is no shame in that. My father helped me get started. You know, unfortunately for him, he didn't have that.
Yeah.
But
He had somebody.
but he did have someone. My father was working on a loading dock, and the man, and this is when he was a young man, and they said, William, as bad as we hate to see you go, you do not need to be on this loading dock. You need to be somewhere else. And my father didn't have a lot of formal education, and he said, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to send you to school because you don't have the education that you need. And so it wasn't a family member, but it was a person that saw him as a person that could do more, be successful. So they took a chance on him. And so although he didn't have the parent, he did have a person that said, hey, you're special. You need to be an entrepreneur. And so the rest is history. But I think all the opportunities that I've given you, you've never let me down. You've communicated with me. You've answered my questions. I don't claim to be an expert in dirt or landscaping, but I ask you,
Right.
I'll say, well, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? Or Will, I'm always out there. Don't get too close to the line or what, whatever it is. And you have the answers and so the confidence that I've seen in you and Gralin is just, it really makes me just so proud and know that you, both of you, are going to be very successful in your future endeavors.
And you take, the jealousy of other people that don't want to put the work in, you take that and you use it as motivation to keep on rocking.
Well, not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur, and that's okay. That's not it. You have to have a special mindset to be an entrepreneur. There's people that just that they're fine. They want to go to work at 8:30 or 9 and have a very important job,
Right.
but they don't want to carry all that home. That is fine. That is awesome. So not everyone has the same mindset of, hey, I was on the phone at 10 o'clock last night, talking about a rental situation that I had pop up, or on the weekend where we're out doing an activity. Well, guess what? Your activity just ended because you got a sewer backup. I've got to get people on the job, so it's just a different mindset. One, I don't think is better than the other. It's just whatever you find happiness in, that's what it's all about. That's where you're going to find your peace and your joy. Listening more to people that have walked the roads and had some ups and downs and gone through some really hard times and come out on the other side. So, and don't be afraid. Don't be too afraid to take risks. I'm not saying risk it all, but make calculated risks. And because if you're not willing to risk anything, then you won't have anything.
Yep.
So you just have to be careful and thoughtful and make sure you're staying around people that have the same mindset as you do. So just stay around positive people.
For everybody listening, you can do this as well. You can build a business, so don't be scared to make the jump. We'll see you on the next episode.